The historic US-Russia summit in Alaska has concluded. US President Trump welcomed his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. The duo exchanged smiles, they shook hands, shared a laugh and headed to the closed-door meeting in the same car. Now take a look at the top moments when Trump met Putin in Alaska. The Alaska meeting between US President Trump and Russian President Putin is likely to have a significant impact on the global economy now. The meeting is likely to have a bigger impact on financial markets than the week's macro data, including US inflation prints. Take a look at the next report to see what's at stake and how the global economy has fared since the Ukraine war.
Global supply chains have seen a big dent from the Ukraine war. The Alaska meeting takes enormous importance for the global economy as a result. If a ceasefire is agreed on, the war in Ukraine might come to a close. That would be a huge deal in terms of economic and market outlook. Instead of pouring resources into a deadly stalemate, nations could focus on rebuilding, especially in Europe. That's possible only if there is any agreement at all. There may not be, and the US is furiously downplaying expectations. As much as Trump wants to be seen as a peace broker, the US president has repeatedly said it is just a listening exercise. This also may be one of the few occasions where Trump's unpredictability is an asset. Amidst all the downplaying, there's a public warning of very severe consequences if no ceasefire agreement is reached. That could be devastating for the Russian economy. While the sanctions so far have had limited impact, the latest plans are more likely to hurt Moscow. Trump said his tariffs on India for its oil purchases had made the Alaska meeting even possible. While on the other hand, India has stood its ground and continued to buy Russian oil. So far since the Ukraine war in 2022, Russia's performance is a tale of two economies. According to the IMF, Russia's GDP slumped to minus 1.3% at the outset of the war, but has since recovered to 3.6% in each of the last 2 years. While Russia's defense industry has been running hot, its civilian sectors have taken a huge hit. Moscow has been hit by falling oil revenues and Western sanctions. The budget deficit has exploded. The war in Ukraine is beginning to take its toll on the Russian economy, with projections pointing to a weak outlook. On the other side, Trump's economic broadsides are starting to show on the real economy with a lag. The latest job numbers suggest a slowing economy, while inflation prints are starting to reflect a tariff-driven price rise. Beyond the direct economic impact, global supply chains and trade flows will be driven by what happens at the meeting. Whatever happens next feeds into the deep change of geopolitics and economics that is sweeping the world. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, I'm now being joined live on the broadcast by our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's joining me from New York. Susan, we've been discussing the developments that have come in after that press conference. Both presidents spoke, one longer than the other, and it was Putin who spoke first and who spoke more. But if you to just look at it towards the end, no questions were taken from the press. The fact that some big points were not agreed upon, which the US president himself said right in the beginning of his comments. No talk on peace or no commentary on, what may happen on the battlefront. Is it, should one consider as there's no substance really in the statements which have come in so far? Or do you feel otherwise, that this is enough for a first starting point to break the ice between the two countries?
Okay, the way, Siobhan, President Trump went into this, and we talked about this so many times, he said he was going to have this joint press conference only if he saw that there was going to be some kind of viable solution to the conflict, notably a ceasefire. He said that's what he wants. And so there's a lot of questions to be asked right now. I went back and I watched the press conference again. We got absolutely no substance from that press conference. We got pleasantries. There was, a lot of good words said on the part of Putin towards Trump. Hello, neighbor, glad to see you well, glad to see you alive. President Trump was courteous towards President Putin as well, but no questions from the media. So it wasn't really a press conference. And also the question that remains right now and hovers over this press conference is, was there something, as you ask, that convinced President Trump that it was good enough for the two sides to come out there and make the statements that they did? And I was, again, like I said, I was just going back and looking, despite the fact that President Trump called it very productive, President Putin said that, we are at a point where we can start these discussions and hopefully reach a ceasefire. President Trump didn't mention a ceasefire. He didn't say those. So it appears that there is some daylight and disagreement, or at least the way they portrayed that meeting, that's very different. Of course, we're going to get more analysis in the hours and days to come. President Trump has an interview with Fox News at about 9 p.m., which is about 45 minutes from now. I think maybe he'll speak a little more than he did during that 12 minutes of press conference and statements, and you may get a better understanding. But if there is something agreed, we didn't get it. We didn't understand it during that press conference. And maybe it's because he wants to talk on a secure line on Air Force One first with NATO allies and President Zelensky, and then come out and say it. It's very rare that you see President Trump not really be vocal in front of the press and be the person that talks less than his counterpart when he's standing on a podium. But that seemed to be it was very measured, judging from, President Trump and the character that we know of him. But nonetheless, it appears that it was good enough, at least maybe behind closed doors, that he brought the Russian president out there for them to have this joint press conference. But again, devil in the detail. There's so much we still don't know about what really happened. One thing we do know is I don't think there was a ceasefire agreed. If there was a ceasefire agreed upon, we would have heard it. At least one of them would have said it.
No, you're absolutely right there.
Again, maybe they have to talk to Zelensky first, but still.
You're absolutely right, and you've made some very, very sharp observations there now that you've seen it again. And as you mentioned, there are, as far as substance is concerned, there was a lot that one would hope for, seeing it in hindsight. But, talking about those phone calls that now Trump needs to make to the European side, to Ukraine, I just want to, quickly reiterate for our viewers, this statement that came from Putin, that we expect Kiev and European Union that they will not throw a spanner in the works and stay clear of backdoor meetings. Strong words. And of course, the fact that he's not just mentioned Ukraine, he's also mentioned Europe here. Your take on that, the fact that Putin is saying that not just about Ukraine, he's saying that about the entire region.
Yeah, you may remember, and our viewers, I'm sure, remember very well, that a while back when there was a chance for peace between Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, it was Boris Johnson of the UK that apparently We found out later on that convinced Zelensky not to give in for some kind of ceasefire, negotiated settlement, and to continue fighting this war. There are many people in Russia and those that support Russia, and here in the United States as well, who believe that it's Europe that sort of eggs Ukraine on with unrealistic expectations in this war moving forward. Now, there are those that don't agree. They believe that if the United States continues to provide those weapons, whether to Europe, for Europe to provide it to Ukraine, whether to Ukraine directly, then Ukraine has an opportunity and a chance to win this war. But at what cost? So I think that sentiment that he was making resonates not only with many people back home. He's also talking to a domestic audience, but also really to tell Europe that, you know, if you're trying to give some kind of hope to Ukraine, we're going to continue with this war. We're going to continue going at it. Maybe you should be more, quote unquote, realistic. Now, that's not to say that Ukrainians can't make their own decisions. Of course, they've been fighting this war. They're a party to this war. They've been defending their land. So they have to make the decision ultimately. But how Europe treats this and what sort of promises it makes to Ukraine really does determine how hard Ukraine fights against Russia. I mean, that's just the realistic assessment of what's happening.
And Susan, you know, Trump, not in the recent past, but earlier has never minced his words on his thoughts about the European Union. And the fact that Putin has also said it in the same sentence and in the same breath along with Ukraine, it gives you a sense that, you know, Russia and US together are perhaps more advantageous for each other. And you can keep Ukraine and EU out of that equation, because Putin also said this, and he said it out loud, that Russia and US can offer each other so much. And he mentioned a number of domains in which they can, you know, cooperate, they can collaborate. He also mentioned that their trade has already grown by 20% under Trump's administration. And there is so much more. They need to be result oriented, go back to cooperation. Is that hinting at a better arrangement between US and Russia, regardless of what's happening on the battlefield?
Yeah, I mean, there's no secret that Vladimir Putin prefers to make this about Russia and the United States. Just the fact that this meeting was held in Alaska was a huge point in that direction, so far away from Europe and Ukraine, isn't it? And Russia really wanted to make this meeting as much about bilateral relations and then, you know, what's happening in Ukraine and by extension, Europe. Well, you can't really separate the two. And then on the other hand, you're right. President Trump has been a leader, and it's been no secret that he prefers to deal with countries bilaterally. He does not like a multilateral setting. And he just prefers to have these negotiations one-on-one. I think President Trump sees a lot of opportunity for the United States and Russia to work together on a number of issues. I think he's going to keep that in his back pocket and try to use that as incentives for Putin to come forward now that there is sort of that welcome and that those gestures and those comments that we heard during the press conference. But, you know, how far that'll go ultimately is yet to be seen, considering the fact that he's also saying that he's going to be very tough on Russia and start imposing secondary sanctions, more tariffs on third-party countries and whatnot, if Russia doesn't resolve the Ukraine issue. So ultimately, while it does seem that there is a bilateral aspect to it, they're so interconnected when you look at it.
Susan, you've made some pertinent points there. I think we'll let you go for the time being. You've had a long day as well. But, you know, these developments are going to keep coming in. Now we need to wait and watch what happens on the battlefield, and also perhaps the next interaction Trump has with the media, which will definitely be longer than 3 to 4 minutes. He never shies away from interacting with the media. He's very quick, you know, in taking questions, regardless of where he is, whether he's in transit or whether he's just landed. But this time there were no questions taken from the media. Of course, that also speaks about the fact that, you know, nothing substantial has been decided for the battlefront. That was Susan Tehrani speaking with us and, of course, bringing us all the latest and analyzing. Anything more, Susan, you want to say?
No, I was just saying absolutely right. And it was very out of character for President Trump not to have much to say to the media. You're absolutely right.
It's definitely something we've not seen happen very, very frequently. And the fact that Putin, the way he was smiling, how often do you see anything other than a poker face on the Russian president? You really don't know what he's thinking. But this time the body language was out there for everybody to interpret openly. He was more than happy and, of course, had enough words to say as well. But Susan, thanks so much, for sharing all that with us. And there will be more to discuss. We'll come back to you. Now, viewers, with no summit deal reached with Putin over ending the war in Ukraine, WION also spoke with analysts to weigh in on what they make of the Alaska summit. Listen in.
It's the Kremlin that nothing is out of bounds. They were able to hit these airfields, some of them more than 2,000 miles away, obviously with help from inside Russia. And many of the aircraft that were destroyed were strategic bombers that the Russians cannot replace. These are old bombers. Bear bombers are very old. The backfire bombers are from the 1970s. The Blackjacks are from the 1980s. We're talking about very old strategic bombers that cannot be replaced. Now, Kiev knew very well that there was going to be massive retaliation on the part of the Russians, and Mr. Putin pretty much told that to President Trump. But the one thing that holds the Russians back is that if they would respond with a nuclear response, that would trigger something that they don't know whether they could control, number one. Number two, depending on where the strike hits, there would be blowback inside Russia. And number three, Mr. Trump is known to react exceedingly strongly when he sees children killed. That's why he already called Putin crazy. We don't know, and Putin doesn't know, how Trump would respond to a nuclear attack. And so even though the Russians have been threatening this pretty much for 2 years, it hasn't happened. Kiev knew very well that they would be struck. That's not a surprise at all. But I think they took that into account.
All right, viewers, we are going to slip into a short break now, but this is our continuous coverage of the Alaska Summit on all the developments that have come in so far. Stay with us. This is WION World is One. I'm Shivan Chandna. Come right back after this break.